Hi, today's the 11th of the 11th, 215, Remembrance Day for all those that died for freedom and for peace, fighting for freedom and peace. And also was the Remembrance Day for my family, for my mother died this day as well in 1978. So it's a significant day. And I just want to put forward, we often speak, or the world often speaks about a new world order or new world vision, let's say, for the world. And I think, maybe it's time now that we really did start believing and working towards and having a vision for abolishing all wars and the reason and source for all wars, which a lot, I think, is due to what we believe about the message of God, particularly at the moment. So I'm just going to go briefly over that. I'll try and make it as quick as I can so that, many might look at it and perhaps have that vision, because I think the whole world has to have that same vision, knowing what we're working towards, so that we can begin to change the world for the better. Because if we abolish war, we release much of the money and energy in mankind and in the world so that the money can be distributed for better things, for those that are starving or in crisis, throughout the world, and a better distribution of funds anyway, and also, really stop some of the horror that's in the world due to war, which seems to embroil the children at a very young age before they even get time to think. And I recently saw the trailer of Steve Jobs, who was the instigator or innovator for Apple, and for everyone to have a computer in their home. Now, Einstein said that imagination is greater than knowledge, and I think what he meant is that it was obviously Einstein was a great mathematician and scientist, and Steve Jobs, he had. I've recently learned that he wasn't necessarily the innovator from the point of view of knowing terribly well how to set up computers or make computers or the software for the same, but he was a little bit like a conductor in an orchestra. He had the vision and he brought the people together to create that vision, to make it happen, and that was his gift. And I think this is what we need to do for the world. We need to have a vision for the world, and I think this is what Einstein meant: is that imagination is greater than knowledge. Because if we have the imagination, even collectively, particularly collectively, that to actually resolve the wars, stop the wars, because it's obviously the general public also that create the wars as well. We get different factions, different tribes together, and then they start fighting, and then it explodes more and more, and then we get destruction throughout the world now. So, if we have this vision, all of us, the same vision, now that we have the internet, we can promote this, and the world leaders as well have that same vision and work towards this abolition of wars and creating a greater distribution of finances and materials and knowledge throughout the world, then we can accomplish much more, and our talents will be released in doing what's good for the world rather than what's to be destructive in the world. So with that in mind, I have 10 points with regard to a possible new world order or new world vision, different steps that I think we need to take in order to accomplish this, starting from the refugees that we have at the moment, because we've got to resolve that now, and the Syrian war. So point one, with the matter at this very moment, I do think it is the case that we're saying that the refugees are war refugees, but in actual fact they're all coming now from a place of safety or semi-safety. they're coming from Turkey or Lebanon or the aid camps, so they've reached a place of safety and they're just moving on to improve their lot. So they then become economic migrants. And we have to remember that when people go onto the boats there and take their children onto it, there's very little that we can do for people that have decided to do that, because you also have to remember that they're coming from a different culture and different religion, and that they're probably trusting in God, believing that he will save them, perhaps, or even if they do die, that they will go to paradise. They're taking this risk, and we can't, people can't be responsible for that sort of thing, because the other issue is that if we take so many immigrants, believing that we're responsible for them, and then we've already having difficulties ourselves in Europe. Germany may not be, because they need youth, I think. From what I understand, they've got space. They're the richest country in Europe. But Germany can't apply their same criteria that they have for the rest of Europe, because even now some countries are saying that they're running out of homes and that sort of thing. But this was our difficulty with England. We've already run out of home from the very onset, which is why even when people are saying, oh, we must take more, we're already having difficulty. The NHS system and the homes and the school places, they're all already at breaking point. And now other European countries are saying something similar, and that it needs to be distributed. But the thing is, we can't keep distributing, because if they keep coming, we're going to sink as well, Europe. So there has to be a common sense here. So leading on to that, so we need to stop vilifying each other in Europe. I think Mrs. Merkel has to issue a statement saying now that no more refugees will be taken, because it's now regarded that all refugees coming are economic refugees, and that a greater focus will be spent on resolving the war, and that more aid will be given to the camps around, and possibly to Turkey. But if we do have an arrangement with Turkey and aid is given to Turkey, it won't be in conjunction with releasing more visas to the Turkish citizens or otherwise, because that will just make the situation worse. We get the refugees and the Turkish coming in, and we're again be in a worse situation. We're getting Eritreans and other people in Africa that again, and all over from Europe, that are coming on the lines of being refugees, and they're not strictly refugees, and once they come, it's very difficult for them to be sent back. So we have to be, pragmatic about this. So then the second point is that we need to focus more precisely on the Syrian war, which they are beginning to do now in Vienna, I believe, and the UK and US and other nations on the Allies side there are beginning to talk about allowing President Assad to stay for a period. There was, I think they'd agreed on that, but the UK and USA were still saying that he shouldn't be allowed to stand in the elections, and Russia feels that he should, and I agree with Russia again on this, because if we're looking at democracy, it's not for the Syrians to say he can't stand when some of Syria actually are quite happy with him, and he's keeping some parts of Syria in peace. So, by democratic standards, he should be allowed to stand. And yes, he's maybe bombed his people, as I say, as I've spoken before about. Saddam Hussein was accused of this as well. But we need to do something different from Saddam Hussein, and President Assad is different from the point of view he's been educated in England, and he's he understands Western philosophy as well. And obviously the rebels, when this war started 5 years ago, presumably they were bombing or creating difficulty, and gradually it's escalated. So one has to, and the allies have got Al Qaeda and Hamas, I think, or Hezbollah on their side, and and many of the factions that are on the Syrian Free Army are Islamic factions as well. So, there has to be a degree of imperfection in this, and people are going to have to compromise a little bit. And I do feel that, particularly if that's the only sticking point, the UK and America are wrong in saying that President Assad cannot stand, and so are the rebels, the Syrian rebels or Free Army, because what is happening in Syria and what they're doing is affecting the whole world now, or will affect much of Europe, as well as all the many people that are dying, and we need to come together as one to repel IS, which we all want to do. So, and then the third point is, following this, we maybe should begin once we've established what is going to happen with Syria. We need a dialogue within the international community to end all wars. It is generally agreed, I think, and can be seen in the world, and I think the general public of the world are beginning to see that democracy brings the most stability, the most prosperity, and the most freedom of movement to the people, and the general public throughout the world are beginning to see this, which is why everybody wants to come to Europe. If they could, they would go to America and Australia and other places. But again, the whole world can't come into the free world because it won't work. It will become imbalanced. So we need to perhaps let all the international nations, the leaders of the nations, even Saudi Arabia, Iran, and all the nations, the African nations, start thinking that we gradually work towards democracy. And the democratic countries start assisting these countries who verbally state they want to start making commitment to work towards that, and that the West will begin to help them in that with education on how to set up the systems in the separation of powers and the institutions that support democracy, and also the separation of religion from politics, because this brings oppression. It's always brought oppression, even in the centuries gone by, and that it should be known that even the West, we should acknowledge in the West, and that it's nothing shameful or anything that some countries are still in this state of civil war and that sort of thing, because even America and the UK, centuries ago, we used to battle between ourselves as well, and gradually we've grown out of that, and Europe as well, and we need to remember that and learn from it. But let's let all this knowledge come to the fore with the international leaders as well as the general public, so that maybe in a space of 3 to 5 years, this preparation to move into democracy may begin for all the world and the nations that are not following that style of politics yet. And so maybe we can begin to work along those lines. And then the fourth point, we should have a baseline education for all people, which can be accessible online as well. In England, for instance, I think we should bring again grammar schools into our system, and we should stop vilifying the people that are academically clever, or trying to hold them back by saying, we must have comprehensive schools and we can't have grammar schools because it makes the other 90% of the children feel like a failure. But we can't hold back, as we shouldn't hold back the people who are not so clever and should give them help. We shouldn't be holding back the people who are very academic. It's just another gift, a talent, a particular talent, and we should allow these people who are academically talented like this, be they in the working class or from the higher echelons of society, we should allow these children to develop and grow, and encourage them. And obviously they have to have a degree of humbleness about them, because obviously it's not something they can do themselves. It's a God-given gift or a quirk of nature that they have this ability, this greater ability. So they should be humble about it, because it's not something they brought on themselves. But the masses, the public, the general public, should also have some humbleness as well, and not try and hold these people back by saying, oh, you're going to make us feel bad, so we're not going to let you develop and grow. But no, it's not a case that everybody, the 90%, are failing. It's just that the 90% have a different gifting, and even if you're in that 90%, it may be that you develop and mature later on in life, and still can become very academic, because maybe you've had trouble at home, or you haven't come from a very helpful family, and you just haven't been able to focus on such things. Because if we're emotionally upset when we're young and trying to learn, we can't take things in, but later on they may do. So I do think we need to allow grammar schools or similar in all nations, so that these people that are academically talented are encouraged, because we need them. They're the ones that create the innovations of the world, be it in science or in technology or in leadership or in developing drugs and that sort of thing. And we need these people, and they create the jobs for the rest of us, as do some that are in the 90% that may not go to these schools initially, but they may develop and be entrepreneurs, and we still, all the giftings that we have, we still are very much needed. We need doctors, nurses, people, carers, and there's a great gifting in that. It's just a different gifting, and we just need to change the attitude towards people that are just have that particular gift of being academic. So along the lines of that, we should. I've also put on my website, certainbattle.com. There's 7 DVDs which give you the baseline of science, how science has developed, and the different individuals that have developed science, sometimes by chance, and astronomy, the sun, and the sun is a star basically, and there's all these stars out there which are suns, which could have potential planets, which is quite remarkable really. And how and then also the basis of religion and Islam, and the Jewish basis of how Jerusalem was established, and it does involve the beginnings of Islam as well throughout in these 70 DVDs. I haven't got a particular one for it yet, but I will do. And also the history of mankind, how man developed. And these DVDs can be watched even by children from 11 onwards, so that they have a baseline of knowledge of themselves, of the world, how science developed. So even if you're not terribly academic at all, you can still understand where you are, who you are, and where we are in the world. Covering the whole world's history to an extent. These 70 DVDs are the baseline of what I could find at the moment, but perhaps we could just, in the process of time, provide some that are specifically covering each area. But these may be sufficient as well. And, maybe for the children that are not academic, from age 11 onwards, at the beginning of each term, or once a year anyway, that they watch these DVDs. It's maybe about, 30 hours of viewing, but in that you could have the basic information that you just watch. You don't have to read or do any let's not impose any written work or anything that they need to do, and just let them watch it. Let them take in the whole picture of the world and of science, of what it all is, just in there by the viewing. And because speaking from experience, I felt I was in a degree of darkness, because even up to the age of 30, until I read the Chronicles of the World back to front, and in a short space of time, maybe in 6 months, and the Bible I read twice in the space of 6 months, and I read the Quran in the space of a couple of months, and then I read that again a couple of times afterwards, and I've read the Bible several times again. And when you read or watch something in a very short space of time, you have the whole message more compact in your mind, and you don't lose track of it. And I found that this darkness and insecurity and unknowing that I was in was actually lack of knowledge, lack of education. And as I say, it can be very simply provided in just watching these 7 DVDs. So that's point 4. Now, point 5. We have a very entrenched mindset with our knowledge. We have, for instance, the Word of God. The Jews believe one thing, the Muslims believe another thing, the Christians believe another thing, and we need to read both of these books, really, the Bible and the Quran, because again, our mind is very entrenched on just what I as a Christian used to read, or a Jew may read, or a Muslim may read, and we won't let other thoughts in because we think we're right, even though we might be saying, well, I'm open-minded or similar, but really you're not, because you're believing what you have is right, but you're believing on it, but you may not, as I hadn't read the Quran, and you can't really pass comment on anything unless you've read it or know about it. So, and it's the same with any knowledge, whether you're believing in communism or believing in the Labour or the Conservative in the English politics, or whether you're believing in Islam and that we should have imams to rule from rule the country. But it's all based on the limitations of what we know and what we've been taught by our parents, for instance, and what we've been taught by society. India, for instance, they have various gods, or believe in reincarnation, where we come back as different animals and that sort of thing. But it's all down to what their culture has taught them, and the fact that they haven't knowledge hasn't been given to them of other issues. Now, if knowledge is more accessible online, then it will be, the whole world will gradually know what the facts are. And, if they have these 7 DVDs, which can be viewed free online, hopefully eventually, then the whole world will have a baseline, simple knowledge that they can watch, that they don't have to go through great costs or great lot of written work, or even if they can't read, or it's a different language, they could have subtitles in it. They will have the basis of this basic knowledge, and the same. So we'll open our mind to all the knowledge that's generally there in the world, in a very basic manner. We don't have to go into detail, because it's in the detail sometimes that we get lost. And as the saying goes, we can't see the wood for the trees. And it's the same with the one true message of God. We need to read the Bible and the Quran in order to get the cream of the actual message of the word. And I feel that we, if you imagine a jug of milk and the cream at the top, a large jug of milk, you've got the Bible and the Quran is that milk. Now, the one true message of God is what you get once you've read both of those books, and is the cream at the top. Now, I've produced this book. It's not perfect, from the point of view of presentation, perhaps, because it's illustrated. What I believe is the cream of the milk of the word of these 2 books. So I've read both of these books very well. I have experienced the power of God. So I know that there is something there. And I know that there are contradictions in the Quran and contradictions in the Bible, significant contradictions, and that the leaders, because they're having this entrenched mindset, haven't read both books and all of the books, as ISIS hasn't, and the Christians haven't read both books or all of their book necessarily. As the Muslims, they rely on some verses but don't read all of the book, or read them ad hoc here and there. And the Jews don't read the Gospels, nor the Quran, I'm sure. But, and the Quran does actually agree that Christ was born by the power and word of God, because it says, God says be and it is, when Mary asked about how could she have conceive a child when she hadn't known a man. So I'd go into that in my other video clips I've got on my website, acertainbattle.com, which you'll see on the YouTube section there. But if you read acertainmyth.com, you will have the book you can read online free. So we need to establish this one true message of God, the cream of the message. Once we have read both the Bible and the Quran, this is the cream of the message, and it can be read in 1 to 3 hours, and it won't take you the lifetime of reading I've had of 60 years of reading and 60 years of life. And it's, even the book has taken me 5 years to create, and so it's not something that I've just pulled out of the top hat, in this last 1 or 2 weeks or months. It's taken years. So please read that, and let's just establish the one true message of God, so that we can abolish all the errors, and then we can abolish many of the wars as well. And we may also release the nations to start developing democracy in throughout the world, which will then begin to establish distribution of freedom and funds throughout the world, and prosperity. And number 6, I think along these lines, we need to establish, maybe first in England, a 12-program discussion program where we bring in the Jews, the Christians and the Muslims, significant people, and atheists, and people like Richard Dawkins, if he's willing to come, and the scientists and atheists, so that we can have the discussion about the one true message of God, use that as a basis, because the Trinity is wrong, as the Muslims would agree with me on, and I agree with that. Jesus isn't God, he's the Son of God, but he's not God as well. And the Jews, the Jews and the Muslims would agree with that. The Muslims agree that Jesus is the Messiah, and that Jesus is God is gathering people to Jesus already, and that the Muslims agree that Jesus will be coming again. So there's many things we agree on, but if you've read both books, you realise that there's so many contradictions in both of them that they can't, neither the Bible nor the Quran is the perfect word of God that you can follow perfectly word for word, which is what ISIS is trying to do. And you cannot take all the writings surrounding the Bible and the Quran as part of the perfect truth of God, because the hadiths were spoken when the prophet of the Quran was not under this inspiration of God. It was spoken when he was just living, so you can't take that as the inspired word of God, as you can't take the writings of the Catholic teachings as the writings of God, because it wasn't under the inspiration of God. And the Catholics teach about purgatory and Jesus being or Mary being the mother of God, and that we should pray through her, and none of this is right either. And that the Jews believe there's a Messiah yet to come, that Jesus isn't the Messiah. But again, I won't go into it now, but you will see, I touch on it in the Certain Myth, that you will see that if there was a Messiah to come, due to prophecies in the Bible, he had to come around the time Jesus came, or there is no such thing as a Messiah. Somebody had to come at that time to be the Messiah, and if he didn't come then, there's no such thing as a Messiah, and the Bible and the Quran are not true. And we'd all be fighting for no purpose, and all this trouble we have in the world about religion would be for no purpose. So we need this 12-program TV discussion program. Now the 7th point is that we need, I think we should perhaps start, once we've established democracy, the basis of that, we should start also polity polling. Aristotle said that democracy, which is the rule of the many by the few, is a corruption form of polity, which is the view of the rule of the many by the many. Now we have democracy now, which seems to be the most successful, but not perfect. Mostly because there's a lot of corruption in mankind generally, be we politicians or the or the ordinary public. We're all prone to that, unfortunately. But polity polling, which we could do now by the use of the internet, for instance, we could polity polling, so that everybody registers from 18 onwards, but maybe we have their age, which religion they're from, and which nation they're from, and which yes, those, so that we have a basis of, so we can see what sort of mindset they're coming from. But the government, each government, we can start with England and say the government was forward a question they might want to know of the public, what their opinion is. For instance, the European referendum. They could, even before the one that's going to be a law-abiding referendum by vote, but prior to that, we could have a referendum where they say, do you feel that you want to come out of the EU or stay in? And we could vote online once we've registered, to say yes or in or out, and the governments would know before the European referendums how the feeling is of the public, and that the results can be viewable to the public as well. But the government won't be duty bound or law bound to abide by this polity polling, because obviously until it's perfected so that it's people can't mishandle it or corrupt it by the internet so that they get more votes than they should, and therefore you get the wrong result. And also with this each decision that needs to be made, for instance, about the European referendum, whether we stay in and out, there's for each question there should be a short video clip, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, for the reasons why it would be a good idea to stay in Europe and the reasons why not, that it wouldn't be a good idea to stay in Europe. So each person that votes, they watch these video clips first, so they have a basic knowledge. So we know that everybody has a basic knowledge of what the main issues are and why the experts might feel we should stay in or stay out. And then each individual can bring the more general view together with their own experience of life, because obviously you may have children or young people of 18 that haven't got they may be educated but haven't got the experience or the education about the history of what might have happened before. For instance, we've had a lot of difficulty with strikes and unions during the 70s and 80s, and which is why I'm very much against socialism, because we can keep giving and giving, but at the end of the day you bankrupt the taxpayer, and you can't do that. And if you keep having strikes, you bankrupt the taxpayer again and cause them a lot of difficulty. You can't go to work, or for instance we had a 3-day week and lights out for a period because of the miners' strike. So that once people have seen these video clips, then they make a vote, and then that can be seen by the politicians and the leaders, so that so that the whole world, in each nation, though, if there's queries going out for the nation, or for worldwide, maybe it could also be encompass worldwide polity voting, so that for issues about war or something that's going on in the world, about global warming, everybody can then vote on it, and the whole world will know what could be done, what should be done, and the whole world, this population can take part. We may have to make adjustments, because if you've got a lot of people in Africa, for instance, that feel that they should be given more money, and then but obviously you have to be logical that if you've only got so much money, you can't have half a millions voting for that, not because obviously it's going to benefit them, but you can't. But you've got a lot of people working, and that are paying for all this, and that it will bankrupt it if we did what all the Africans wanted. So we have to have common sense on doing it, but I think it could lead towards something. So that's the number 7. Number 8 is, I think, perhaps, and please don't be offended by this, but I suggest it for expediency, for the world's sake, for greater understanding, is that we establish English as the second language to be learnt. I do this because I suggest this because it's the main language of several countries in the world already: Australia, America, England, New Zealand, and it's the second language of many countries in the world already. And it's the language that's used, I think, in some institutions like the airline pilots. They use it, and I think maybe in science and in the computer technology, I think they use it as the base language, but I'm not 100% sure on that, but some of them. And, you know, if perhaps along those lines we establish some sort of free online access, if it's not already there, where people can, a very simple means of using just the basic language that they can learn online. Because now many people, I believe you can have people even in Africa and that sort of thing, they can have a mobile phone and can receive money and can receive, you know, information and that sort of thing. This is why all the Syrians can, and even in Africa now, can see what we have in Europe. So, you know, due to this technology, if we can establish English as a second language, as well as helping the people to communicate better and the leaders to communicate better, it will enable the work opportunities to be available to everybody in the world, wherever they go, in any country. So I just ask you not to be offended by that. I'm not doing it for any reason about establishing, you know, English. It's just for expediency, and I hope you can see that that this would be the quickest way for everybody to be able to communicate. For those that believe in the Tower of Babel, and that, you know, in Genesis it said that God was concerned that when they built the Tower of Babel, he supposedly came down and said, oh look, you know, they all speak the same language, and now look what they begin to do. Now nothing will be restrained from them, and he confused the languages. And then they were scattered and they stopped building the tower. Now, to me, if it's true, it could be a myth, it might not be a myth. I think it has some truth in it, or is meant to teach us something, or there may be truth in it. I wouldn't like to say one way or the other, but if there is truth in that, for those who believe it and feel that there would be danger in us all speaking the same language, I say to them that the situation has changed now. Times have changed now. You know, Christ has come. He's abolished all religious laws, be they the Sharia or the Jewish religious laws, or the Sabbaths that we meant to, the Christians even try and establish, you know, Sunday worship and that sort of thing, and the circumcision and special diet and special beard, whether we were male or female. All of that is fulfilled by Christ. And even the issue with the language, you know, he has come now, and we're meant to be, as we believe in Christ, that he has come, and that he's the sort of representative of God on earth for us when he comes again. If that is true, that he's coming again, and there is truth in the Bible and the Quran, then there's nothing dangerous, because, you know, now we're submitting ourselves to Christ, to his rule. So, you know, we're going to be restrained by that Spirit of God that is in us, which is what the one true message of God is about. And if you go into a certain myth.com, you will see what the one true message of God is about. So, as I say, for those who have fear about having one language, there is no need to fear, because times have changed now. Number 9, I think we need to have more rigid controls on that Google and Facebook, etc., agree to and not submit to necessarily, but, you know, it should be established fact that we have to control these more, and we put more funds into not allowing pornography, paedophilia, gambling and that sort of thing on the internet, because they're destructive, they're addictive, and they give the wrong impression to the youth of what life is meant to be, and they get caught up and destroyed, their life destroyed before they even begin. in life. And we should have a degree of zero tolerance on this. And I'm sure if we've got the entrepreneurs and the geniuses of internet use focus on this, we could easily resolve this as well, and get, before these platforms that they use are on there, they can be taken off. And that those people, that there should be counselling or some sort of self-help book, or more focus on what we can do to help these people in gambling, paedophilia, pornography, as to what is occurring in their life, and there be more counselling, even along the lines in the baseline education in schools, or what we start changing the system in schools, where the education system actually gives the children counselling on a monthly basis. Perhaps they have several counsellors in each year, or one counsellor for each year, 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, etc. And they one male, one female maybe, and they go through the whole school, and each child has once a month maybe, or once every 3 months, a counselling session about what's going on in their life, how they're feeling about life, that they can be directed to self-help books, or discuss what they think they're good at, so that they can be directed in their careers, and if they're beginning to develop some sort of addiction, or they're having trouble with bullying, that they can be assisted in that, or they're being abused in some way, they can be directed to Childline, which is 0800 1111, I believe. And that these things are dealt with early on in life, and that if they're having a sort of criminal tendency, that they and even in the education system, that they're given this basic facts of life, about philosophy of life, that if we reap what we sow, for instance, that if you drink too much sugar and coke and that sort of thing, you will become overweight and you'll get diabetes. If you drink too much alcohol, you will get drunk and become violent and make yourself ill. And if you and get addicted, if you take drugs, you will make yourself ill. You'll ruin your career chances, and you will get addictive, and it will kill you and make you a zombie, basically. And you could die at some disco, unexpectedly. If we need to give them the basics, because some of these children have come from difficult families, with families, the parents themselves that haven't had the education, and they're in crime or smoking, drinking, and not treating their children well, and the children need to be given direction on that, so that we break the continual we break the thread, so that they start seeing the common sense view of life. So there's that. And then finally, I think we should perhaps look towards setting up a central fund, an international fund that everybody can pay into, for distribution for all peoples throughout the world, little by little. For those that might be on $1 a day, for instance, that we might make it, increase it by giving everybody $1 a day. An extra dollar a day in addition to what they're already earning, and gradually build it up. Because now, as I was saying, that everybody has a mobile phone now, which they can communicate with and see what's going on to the internet, and see what's happening in the world, and they can be taught certain educational things, hopefully, and learn English, or whatever else they want to learn, and maybe see these DVDs, the baseline education DVDs online. Hopefully we could make that free as well at some point. But they could also receive this money if they register. They could receive this money once we establish it sufficiently that it could be distributed, and they could receive it either in a currency or by Bitcoin, because I understand Bitcoin can be transferred very, very, like 90% cheaper than ordinary currency, and then they can change that Bitcoin into the currency that they want. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe that's the way it could function. And obviously in the central fund, I think it's quite well known now, I hear it several times, that 90% of the world's wealth is held by 10% of the rich of the world, or the 10% of the world who are the rich. So maybe that 10% of the rich could put their money, whatever they decide. It's voluntary how much they put in. They can put that money into that central fund, be it run by the UN or some other body. And the nations can put money into that, even instead of giving aid to the African leaders, where it's not being distributed, and they put it into Swiss bank accounts and it's being used by the corrupt officials. That it's put in even the aid may be put into this central fund and is distributed to the people directly by this Bitcoin or currency they request. And gradually we improve the lot of the people throughout the world, and we bypass these corrupt leaders, and that may also encourage them to become more democratic as well. So as well, also, because in the book A Certain Myth, on the last page I mentioned just briefly that according to the New Testament it talks about how the disciples, everybody sold their land and houses and that sort of thing and gave it to the disciples, and it was distributed to those who had need, and nobody had lack and nobody had too much, and it was a balance. And I think that's perhaps, if the Bible and Quran is true, that's what we're meant to aim for. So along these lines, I'm suggesting this central fund, that we could open it up, we could just see if it works. Obviously, again, from the point of view of corruption, and we need tight controls that people don't register more than once on their mobile phone, and they only have one phone, for instance, per person, that they can receive these funds. But again, if we get those who are very good at the computer technology, then I'm sure it can be overcome. And then along these lines too, as if everybody has mobile phones where they can access the information, we can. If all the world knows and the people know what we're aiming for, then there may be patience with that, and maybe even those that are fighting may, stop the fighting, because the world is trying to eradicate war in order that distribution worldwide of wealth and prosperity may come, and that if everybody has the same languages, everybody will have the same opportunity to be able to apply for jobs and to be able to maybe be educated via the websites to a degree that they may be able to get a better job, maybe if they're in Africa, in Europe somewhere, or in Australia, and then they could increase their education if they have the level, they want to be a doctor or a surgeon or similar, that they could increase their education within that country, because perhaps that couldn't be done to that degree by mobile phone. So I just ask that perhaps we maybe think along these lines. I ask the world leaders to perhaps think along these lines, or the think tanks that they have, that we can change on this Remembrance Day, that of remembering all those that have died in the wars over the centuries. And I'm talking about even from ancient biblical times, that we keep fighting and warring and people dying, and for young people, because they can't find work, and and they go into soldiers just so that they have food to eat, or there's something there. And if we could do this, instead of all this money and effort that we have fighting, or the money going into war armaments, it could go into, our efforts could go into the actual the talents of creating greater prosperity in the world, and addressing the global warming and this sort of thing. And we could use all our talents for whatever we're good at in science and technology, and maybe Christ will come, and maybe he will come. Please read A Certain Myth, and get that cream of the message. It doesn't need to take us years of reading now. It can be 1 to 3 hours of reading, 1 hour just to get the basic gospel message, and 3 hours to get all the different errors that might be coming in. And even ISIS is they're victims of their own lack of knowledge, and even those suicide bombers, they're victims of their own lack of knowledge. And if they had that full knowledge of both the Bible and the Quran, because I'm sure they haven't read both, they would see that the word of God, the true message of God, is that we hear the word. God is, in the beginning was the word, word was with God, and the word was God. And that when we hear that word that Christ spoke, that you have to read what he spoke in the Gospels, we then receive God's Spirit into us, and it's that brings life, causes us to rise again, and we enter paradise or eternal life, whichever way you want to call it. And it's not that God is three, that's quite right, I quite agree with that, but we hear the word, we speak the word, it passes to other people, and that's God's Spirit going forth with truth when we're speaking it according to the Bible and the Quran, from the point of view of the whole message. Now, if you go onto acertainbattle.com as well, you'll see there's a 2010 Creed of God, links to a One True Message of God, links to another book I've got, A Certain Life with a Certain Message, where I give details about where I experienced the power of God 5 times in 1988, and that one's not free at the moment, but I might make it so. But on the certain in a certain message under the heading the certain series, you'll see I've given the pages where I explain what happens, so you can see that free online. But I just ask everyone worldwide, leaders and church leaders and leaders of Saudi Arabia and Iran and Israel. I know I'm just an ordinary person, but for some reason my focus has been to discover whether there's a God or not, and my experiences in life have been a little strange. And I'm bringing out another book, Is a Certain Coincidence, or Is It God? And that gives all the coincidences, including these 5 strange incidents in 1988 that occurred in my life, which occurred in others' lives as well, and others have experienced this strange power and have been. And I've given details of these people on thecertainbattle.com. Significant things. Everything is very, very strange. There is God there, I believe, and I do believe there is Christ yet to come. And so please, and he's supposed to be coming to rule for 1,000 years with those of the first resurrection, ruling from Jerusalem. But it's not a case that it's a certain nation, be it Jewish or from the Middle East or from Europe or English or anybody like that, because when we submit to Christ, acknowledge that word that God sent in him so that we could receive his Spirit, then it's no longer male or female or Jew or Greek. We're all one under Christ. So all these people of the first resurrection that coming to rule with him are of every nation that have submitted to Christ, and it's no longer about obeying religious rules. It's about for love is the fulfilling of the law, or which is love thy neighbour as thyself, or live and let live, and forgive, if you want to look at it from the secular sense. So, as I say, all these circumcision, long beards, diets, it's all irrelevant. And if you read A Certain Myth, as I say, I've read both the Quran and the Bible. It's the cream of all that milk of the Word of the Quran and the Bible in that jug of milk. Certain Myth is that cream. Can be read in 1 to 3 hours. Please do it, because we could change the world for the better. So on this Remembrance Day, let us remember it be for the day that we began to abolish war worldwide forever.